that minor issue. Let's bring in our CNN political commentator, S.E. Cupp. Angela Rye, she's a political strategist, former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus, and our CNN senior Washington correspondent, Jeff Zeleny. So we're reading a lot of tea leaves over here. We're trying to get a better appreciation. But based on those little comments, it would seem to me he's increasingly inclined to challenge Hillary Clinton.
Well, no doubt about it. And we saw a preview there of what this campaign would sort of look like. I mean, it'll be extraordinary if he decides to run, the sitting vice president running against the former Secretary of State. I mean, they've run against each other before in 2008, but of course everything is so different now. You know, the president picked him to be his vice president. So I think that, Joe Biden is having a good deal of fun with this. The whole town may be sort of on pins and needles, at least Democrats. Certainly a lot of media folks are. But Joe Biden seems to be having a good time. He knows exactly what he's doing there. He was watching that debate. He wants to point out that he would be a different kind of candidate. Now, everyone we talk to is still saying that if they talk to Biden, they're left with the impression that he is running. But it's still important to have a caveat here. He's done this before. He's inched closer before and hasn't pulled the trigger. So we just have to be a little bit sort of a wait and see for a couple more days.
We'll see what he decides. But increasingly, based on all the reporting you're doing, a lot of other reporters are doing, it seems like he's increasingly inclined to throw his hat in the ring.
It does.
All right. S.E., let's take a look at this latest poll. We've got a lot of poll numbers, but I'm going to show you this NBC News Wall Street Journal poll of the prospect of a Biden candidacy. This is among Democrats. Do you prefer he not run? 38%. Would you like to see him run? 30%. No opinion, 31%. You see those numbers. What goes through your mind?
Well, look, Joe Biden is going to have to compete for voters who have either gotten to the Hillary camp or the Bernie camp. You know, small percentage of undecideds. And he knows that. That's why he's staking out his territory right now, that he is running against Hillary Clinton primarily. He is going to marry himself to Barack Obama. He's going to be an electable alternative without the baggage. You also heard in that interview from earlier, he was sort of talking about what he's done as vice president. And one of the things he said he's done is he helped veto or empower President Obama's cabinet. So he's really trying to make the case that he wasn't just sort of an irrelevant figure as vice president while Hillary Clinton was off adventuring overseas. He was really useful and important and sort of making the case that he's in it to get Hillary Clinton supporters or people who want to support Hillary but can't get there.
In almost all the national polls, Angela, if you take a look, he hasn't announced yet, so he's still an outsider, but he comes in third behind Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders. He would have a monumental task if he decides to run.
I think yes and no. I think one of the more telling figures that we haven't talked as much about is the fact that voters in the Democratic primary who are under 50 still feel fairly unsatisfied with the current slate. So there's an opening there. The fact that half of the superdelegates in Congress have not yet endorsed Clinton or Bernie Sanders, I think there's an opening there. The fact that there isn't really anyone speaking to blue-collar workers, millennials overall, there's an opening there. And I think the fact that people of color still are hoping for another kind of President Obama-like figure, another historic person who could represent that agenda, I think it speaks volumes as well. So there is an opening, and like you said, I think he's taking what may be his platform, and he's testing it out.
Yeah, the assumption is he's going to run. The question is, when does he make that announcement? It was interesting today, and we listened very closely at this event at George Washington University honoring the former Vice President Walter Mondale. Biden seemed to say that he did want the president to give the order to go ahead and kill bin Laden, capture or kill bin Laden, even though all the indications until now were Biden was reluctant to do so, including earlier comments by Biden himself and Hillary Clinton herself. This is what he said today.
Only two people who were definitive and were absolutely certain. Leon Panetta said go, and Bob Gates, who's already publicly said this, said don't go. And others were as 59-41. Some ended up saying go, but it was such a close call. And I joked and I said, you all sound like 17 Larry Summers, an economist, on the one hand and the other hand. And they said, Joe, what would you do? And there was a third option that I didn't really think we should do. I said, well, I think we should make one more pass with another UAV to see if it is him. And the reason I did that is I didn't want to take a position to go if that was not where he was going to go. So as we walked out of the room and walked upstairs, I told him my opinion, that I thought he should go, but to follow his own instinct.
All right, so why is this coming up all of a sudden today?
Well, because he has decided to talk about it. I mean, he did not need to go in that lengthy of an answer. And how interesting is that? If you unpack that, there's so much in there. A, he points out that he had the final word with the president, that, when I went upstairs in the residence. So he made sure that he is the first among equals. Second, he did not mention someone else who was in the room, Hillary Clinton. And she has talked about and written about in her book that she supported this. So either A, he is not being completely honest there, or B, being completely honest, saying she supported it initially. Maybe she was leaning toward it, but he could have mentioned her name there. She was the Secretary of State, but he mentioned Leon Panetta and Robert Gates. So I thought that was interesting. And he also maybe, changing things just a touch, by saying that he, did not really support making a second fly around. He's talked about that before. He was very worried about this raid. He wanted some more information.
Hold on for a minute. We're going to get back to the race for the White